Morphs in Leos.
I guess just getting into everything. Like, how did you get into leopard geckos and your whole start into leopard geckos and you being interested in them and wanting to breed them in the future?
Yeah. So you want me to start there?
Yeah,
at the beginning. Okay.
Yeah. Although in the earliest that you could remember you getting into it.
I'll do a short form because there are some episodes from there that would fill a total new podcast. For example, my first ham show and how the situation was so different back then compared to now. So if there is any interest by the audience, just write me. We can cover this up sooner or later. But for now, I just, don't want to mess things up so much. So yeah, let's say I was born 1985.
Yeah.
Yeah, 85.
That's right. Yeah.
I'm breeding leopard geckos over 20 years now, and I'm specializing over the years in line breeding and in conservation breeding, meaning the conservation of color morphs of almost extinct bloodlines. And for all who are interested and want to prove what I say during this interview, no problem at all. I'm gladly give you the credits. You can look up my work over the past years. It has featured in some books, in online articles, for example, Gecko Time, and also in podcasts, various, and of course the Leopard Gecko Pro app by Ron Tramper. But let's start at the beginning. Of course, I was one of those teenagers who just couldn't resist staring at this leopard gecko and this huge smile they had on the face. And yeah, I was immediately smitten. So I was originally breeding guppy and Siamese fighting fish for competition and for standard at a very young age. I was really privileged and very thankful until today that I had parents that were supportive, although they couldn't understand what I wanted with those fish and why I had to breed them and what fascinated me. And I remember, going at the fish store as a child, and this is my mantra until today. And I can feel the young generation here still so clearly. If you're starting out young, you constantly make the experience that you're not taken seriously because you're young. They assume because you're young, you know nothing. And that's not true. I mean, there are books, there is the internet, there's possibilities where you can, get your knowledge. And I was always hungry for knowledge. And whenever I got into animals and, wanted to keep a species, you have to do your research. And for keeping fish, for example, this proved out to be perfect because many fish species you can only breed when they feel perfectly, well, and if they are cared in under excellent conditions. So it started out with the guppy and Siamese fighting fish, and I got into many other fish species later, but the guppies and the betta splendens was definitely a huge cornerstone of my work because I realized I can breed those species easily for certain specific traits. I saw that they looked all different, and there was a chance for me to pick the ones that I liked and put them together, and somehow it started to work out. And my parents noticed this. And yeah, I remember going with my parents to the pet store and, driving everyone crazy because I was like, I want this one. No, not that one. This one. There are 50 fish in that tank. Yeah, no, I get it myself. You don't have to worry. Just give me the net. I'll do it. It was like that all the time.
A specific one. Yeah.
Yeah. I want a specific one. And I couldn't even tell you why. But I saw something in this animal. And over the time and over the experience, you get a feeling which animals you can match up with each other. Of course, you need your basic knowledge, but there's also always a certain feeling that you get with experience. Maybe you experience the same over the years with the leopard geckos. So starting with guppies and Siamese fighting fish and, wanting to breed them for competition because those were the places where all the cool guys went and where the cool fishes were. So after a short time, if you have ever seen a beta splendens in perfection, you forget what the pet trade has to offer, and you're starting to look for very good breeders.
Right.
And I had the great privilege that those breeders didn't send me away and didn't laugh at me because I was so young, but they were taking me seriously, and they were like, okay, if you want to learn, you will work for us or with us, and you will do, certain things that we teach you the methods, and you have to learn them, and you have to read books, and we don't spare you the work. But if you're following our advice, you will see progress. And then if you've proven that you can, breed 2-3 generations yourself without losing the quality in breeding stock, and trust me, this is very hard in guppies because they deteriorate so quickly, then we will tell you our secrets. And that was a huge, fuel for me. That was like, okay, I'm going to show you. I put in everything I have. I'll do what it takes. I don't mind. I want to come to this point. I really want to learn from you. Those were all boys and girls who were so much older than me, so much wiser than me. And yeah, I was really happy to being able to learn some things from them. And that has proven to be a foundation of a good understanding how to build up and also maintain quality in breeding stocks. Maybe we will talk about this later in leopard geckos. The real challenge in breeding leopard geckos, in my opinion, is not so much, just producing a stunning animal once in there in a while. The true quest is to improve the quality that was entrusted to you, or even put it on a higher level. So to do that, it takes a different approach. And
Yeah.
I see you're grinning, you know what
It's
I
a
mean.
lot of hard work. Yeah.
So yeah. Okay, so up until 2005, I was pretty occupied with breeding fish, but I was working in a pet shop in my early teenage years to provide for all of this, because my parents were very, very clever, and they said, Rebecca, we love you, and we don't want to, keep you away from the thing that you love, but you can't spend all our money on fish and fish tanks. So you have to earn that money for yourself. And I was like, okay, let's go. And what would be a better fit than to work in a pet shop in the aquaristic, corner? So that was heaven for me. Or maybe, yeah, I don't know. Maybe the wrong decision, I don't know. But for me, it was perfect. For my parents, they didn't see it coming, that this was, of course, the perfect opportunity to learn more in a very short time, and, also get access to all these beautiful species, discus and, samla, and I don't know all the words, in rainbow fish, you name it. You name it, I probably bred it or kept it at one stage or the other. So, and then all of a sudden, I had a very nice colleague from another department, from the reptiles department, and he was like, "Hey, you like breeding guppies and stuff? I'll have to show you something. I think you'll like that. They are very different in their looks, and it seems that you can select them so well." And I looked at them, and I was hooked. I just fell in love with leopard geckos, and yeah, that was the starting point. So 2005, I bought my first leopard geckos. Until 2005, I just bred them wild types, because basically in Germany at that time, you have to understand that it was a whole different world back then. The first color mutations just started to become available in the US, and it wasn't easy to make an import, especially not as a private person. It was just not possible. So my only chance was to do careful research. I knew about the color mutations. I knew that I wanted to have them, but I also knew that I had big dreams and few money, as so often when you're
That's the
young.
big problem.
So what do you do? Of course, I made a very tough decision that I never regret. I sold all my fish stuff. I sold
Wow.
everything. And it was so hard because those were my lines. I bred purple Siamese fighting fish, and I was the only one at that time in Germany breeding purple Siamese fighting fish. And
Wow.
that was hard, but I gave them in good hands to my colleagues, and I was so determined to get my hands in leopard geckos that I never doubted this decision. So, of course, I had to do a good research of how to start. And I carefully picked my first two females that I bought at Henrik and Lotte from Gecko Galaxen. And the deal was that I had to pick them up. They were the top breeders, one of the top breeders at that time in Europe. And they were from Sweden, I guess, or Denmark. I don't really remember because I've never visited them personally, but they were from one of the Scandinavian countries and they were traveling to Hamm. So that was my only chance. Like, come there, pick up your geckos. Okay, no problem, I'll do that. Ham Show is until now the biggest and, most known reptile show in Europe, and it happens to be in Germany. So that was maybe lucky me.
Yeah.
So of course I traveled to Ham, and then something happened. I just wanted to pick up those geckos, basically, and I met Henrik and Lotte for the first time, and they were a very nice couple in their 50s, probably. And it's bizarre if you compare it to today's standards. Nobody cared at that time. It was just, yeah, you come to the parking place and then you get your gecko. I was like, okay, that sounds a little bit
Little sketchy.
well, yeah, like in the bad movie, when they open the trunk and there's a lot of drugs there, but they weren't
Yeah.
drugs. The
Right.
whole trunk
For
was full
geckos.
of geckos,
Yeah.
and I felt so I don't know, weird. Like, is this even
There's something
legal?
bad. Yeah.
What are we doing here? So of course, yeah, I just wanted to pick up my geckos and I was curious. And then we started talking, and it was just like, hey, I'm starting breeding and I'm interested in color morphs and blah blah. And they were like, I'll show you something. And that is maybe really cool. And that was an understatement. And he opened one box and I was blown away. This moment changed my life forever because I set my eyes on the very first pure electric that was ever imported to Europe, and his name was Saturn.
Wow.
He was a very young gecko. He was just hatched in 2005. He came from Kelly directly with some other females, so they bought a whole group of them, and he had blue eyes. He had dark blue eyes. I'll never forget this. Maybe something similar to what we now see in the amber eye mutation. It didn't stay until adulthood, but as a juvenile, he definitely had it. And he had this intelligence around him I can't even describe. I've never, in my whole career, I've never met another gecko that I cherish so much. I was smitten, and how I got him over 10 years later is another story, and that's definitely a Sherlock Holmes story. So it took me over 10 years. He lives now with
Wow.
me in my
That's
collection.
awesome.
He fathered many, many cool geckos, but definitely that was the point. But those geckos, they were around 2 to 3K at that time. They were
Wow.
unaffordable for just a poor student like myself. Even $200 were so much to master. So
Hmm.
I had to came up really with a plan. And my plan was like, okay, I don't want to cut corners. I really want to go as fast as possible, as good as possible, as I possibly can. I want to breed the highest end geckos, but I can't afford them. So what do I do? So I had to look, very carefully at what I could afford and what was available at that time. But I also, you know, was really determined to make a master plan. Like, I looked which genetics were out there and which ones I could use as a starter base to improve, and then, combine with other things that could, come to my breeding stock later. And so that proved out to be a very good tactic for myself. If there is interested, as I said, I can always, go into detail at another time. But yeah, the Ham Show 2005 changed everything for me. I got my first color morphs back then. I bred them, those females, from Gecko Galaxy to the best male that I could afford, which was from Rayhine. It was a beautiful tangerine, and those were super hypos and baldies. And that was
Wow.
cool at that time. Everybody was
Yeah.
like, whoa. And today, nobody would, yeah,
Yeah.
it's a
Totally different
tangerine.
now.
Nice.
Yeah.
But at that time, that was, people hadn't seen this. They were totally excited. So, of course, for the money that I could afford, I made sure that I only bought the few animals with the best quality, and I bred them together. And of course, they produced significantly better offspring than I would have gotten if I would have gone for quantity instead of quality. So I was able to sell those babies for a little higher price than the others, or many other breeders with normals. And from that money that I gained back, I was able to save again and to slowly and carefully invest. And so I built up my breeding stock practically from scratch, in the last 20 years or so. So that started everything. And everything went from there.
Yeah, wow. It's crazy how I think we all have this one story where we get one animal or one thing that interests us, and then from there it kind of just snowballs into something crazy. And you're like, how did I even get here? You just wake up and there's geckos everywhere. And it's cool that we all have the same passion for reptiles. And I see you have that passion too, and kind of the really big ability to just not let anything stop you and really get you to your goals that you have.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's a love that never leaves your side. And everybody, that's what I said about underestimating. And the last reels that I made on Instagram, they really reflect my own experiences. Everybody around, and sometimes even some competitors, are like, oh yeah, she will get out sooner or later. One day she will, have her own family, and then things will change. Well, I'm still here. And Marsha McGuinness was always there. And sometimes you love something so very much, and it gives you so much inspiration, joy, magical moments, that it accompanies you through the rest of your life. And if reptiles can give you that, then this is definitely a wonderful experience and the best reason to stay in the industry and breed them. Whether you do it as a hobby or as a profession doesn't matter.
Yeah, and for you, like when it came to creating Dragoon Gecko, was that something that, as a way that you were starting to breed and sell, and you came up with that name, or did it just come with time, or how was that kind of started in the whole part of the story?
Well, the whole color morph thing started in 2005, and from that it just quickly escalates, as you said. So of course I was working crazy. I was saving every money. I sold all other stuff that I could possibly sell because I realized I need money. I need much more than, I could otherwise, just set aside. So I really need to make a decision. Do I want fancy clothes, or do I want something else, or do I want to do this? And for me, it was really clear I wanted to do this. So, of course, in 2006, I acquired, that was the next step actually. I acquired a Max No Goes from Alex Hugh. So that was the founder animal of all my modern ghost stuff, basically. And it still goes back all this way. Also,
Wow,
my lavender stuff, it all goes back to the very first animals I acquired 2005, actually. And
wow,
sometimes even the
that's over
wild
10 years
forms.
ago. It's
Yeah.
still been going. Wow.
Yeah, yeah. And time passes so quickly. I still feel the same like in 2005. I don't feel any different. So, and you always learn something new. It's not that yeah, you get some kind of, experience. Okay, I acknowledge that. But there is so much to learn. Every season I learn something new. And every time that I think I know my bloodlines, something randomly, develops into a direction that I've never ever imagined. There's so much potential in line breeding, and this is why line breeding is the foundation of everything I do, because I see it as going to the casino. If you're going to the casino and you're just in there like, oh, maybe I'll win, I have no strategy, I just, you know, go with the flow,
Yeah.
then it might work out, but one in a million maybe. And I never was a player. For me, breeding geckos was always like a game of chess. And you have to see where you're standing, you have to see where you want to be, and then the path opens, and then you see the road that you need to go and the moves that you need to take. And yeah, that is exactly what line breeding is doing. You can, like in a good game of poker game, you can select your cards wisely, and you can play your cards at the right time, and then you can stack your genes into the right direction, and the animals will shift in appearance dramatically. If you compare the very first ghost that I bought from Ray Hine, my animals today, they look nothing like that anymore. This is a complete different story. And that's so cool, because other people that also work with ghosts and are, even thinking about working with ghosts now, can within a few years create something truly unique to them, so that everybody
Yeah.
will say, oh, that's your line of ghosts. So that is so cool. We can build something for everybody's taste, and yeah, create something that is unique to us.
Yeah, and even today, I think going back to some of those amazing pictures of ghosts and lavender ghosts, and still like nothing looks like those ghosts that you've produced over the years. And it's so unique when you see a picture, you're like, oh wow, that's Rebecca's ghost line. That, and it looks so different just through all the work that you've done and selective breeding and really being really particular about some of the animals that you chose to breed.
Thank you. Oh, that really honors me. I mean, if you're on the other side, it's so easy to post a picture and then people assume, oh wow, she must have bought really good animals and that's why it's easy, or she just know what she's doing. That's so easy. So many different factors are coming together in order to really create an end whole quality. And there is always stepstones in your way. And I think you can relate to that so much. I don't know how many um, conversations I had with really well known and famous gecko colleagues, which have way more experience on their belt than myself, even at that stage. And they all tell me it's always the most beautiful gecko that dies of no reason. It's
Mm,
always the one clutch that you don't hatch. It's always the one female that you wanted to breed, but for
right.
some reason she only produces slugs or something. Whatever. Shit happens all the time.
Hmm.
So that is another thing and another aspect that I find very important, also to cover. We are always talking about the bright moments, the cool stuff, but in order to produce an animal like this, for example, my yeah, Max No Ghost, a lavender stripe male who changed everything, in my breeding, and who, was really famous in gecko forums at that time. For this animal, that it was a long route to get there, and there were many steps forward but also steps backward, and you will never have a project where you always hatch out perfect geckos. You will always have some that have, not the perfect pattern or not the perfect color, but they will still be your animals, and you have to love and treat them all the same. They're all worthy of your care and of your love. And if you can't do that, and if you can't handle also the sad moments fighting for an animal, for an animal's life, if you breed 100 geckos a year, no matter how good you select your animals, you will always have the one or the other that just won't eat. And now there's your passion coming in. You need to make sure that you do everything in your power getting this baby on his feet and eating.
Mm.
And you're also responsible, once you handle the situation, not to give it away to a home that is breeding it. So the gecko will not be put in a situation where he or she, could suffer from egg binding or lack of food, whatever.
Right. Yeah. And it's a lot of those things that sometimes people don't see just from looking at the photos on social media. They're like, "Wow, I want to do that and I want to be a great breeder like Rebecca one day," but they don't see a lot of the hard work and sometimes the hard things that come through the day to day with breeding and working with live animals. Like, through like veterinary work too, sometimes, animals are really sick and sometimes there's nothing that you can do and it's really hard to connect the good with the bad, but you have to take both when it comes to breeding.
Yeah. And by the way, this was all the idea behind Dragoon gecko. When I was founding Dragoon Gecko 2007, I convinced my partner, my study partner and colleague Martina Konechny, to team up with me, because I was a vet student at that time and later switched over to another profession. But the time in my study was very, very important and taught me so very much that I can use today in breeding, but also animal behavior and understanding. So I convinced her, and we started Dragoon Gecko basically as a collaboration of two veterinary students, and combine our passion for reptiles with the knowledge that we get in our studies in order to breed leopard geckos in an ethical way and as responsible and healthy as possible. And one part of that was to create a large and rich, diverse genetic pool. So for one breeder alone, this would have been impossible. But with two of us, that was a cool thing. So we were able to build up our bloodlines and develop bloodlines based on the fact that we were a team and we had double the space and double, the possibilities. And fun fact, Martina is today full-fledged veterinarian specialized in leopard geckos.
Oh
she
wow, that's awesome.
she had to withdraw a few years after that because her study just got too intense and she wanted to focus on that, which I totally understand, but we're still very good friends. She checks on my animals from time to time. We are still in contact, and I like to get her expertise, for managing my breeding facility. And she was always more responsible for the medical part, and I was always responsible for the breeding part. And so we perfectly matched together. And the name Dragoon Gecko simply comes from that. I love dragons, and I want Dragon Gecko was already taken, so I wanted to also have a word that stands for its own and is not used so often. And so we came up with Dragoon Gecko.
Awesome. Yeah, that's so cool. It's like such a unique name too that you don't see everywhere. So that's like such a great name for you guys to have. But when it comes to some of the projects, I know you're known so much for kind of your lavenders and your ghosts. We talked about electrics. That's another thing that you worked with. So in terms of different projects that you work with, what are some of the things that you love to see and you love to work with in your breeding colonies?
Oh, wow. That's a good question, because as we've talked about before, there's always one for every step forward, there's also step backward. So I bred and tested a lot of projects and things, and I enjoyed all of them. To be honest, I was the first one to develop a genetically stable four-eyed line. This typical four-eyed pattern that you see on the gecko heads, we were able to isolate this gene and made a known line out of them. But unfortunately, the interest was not so big in the gecko community. So, of course, yes, at a later point, with a heavy heart, I decided to abandon this project. And some of those animals were, flown into creating the modern lavender lines. So they are not totally extinct, but they just changed shape and form. But there was something that we succeeded, but what the market was not really ready for. And as a responsible breeder, you have to be humble. You have to accept that too. Everybody has the right to decide for himself whether he wants to buy your animals or not. And if you are having trouble finding good homes for a certain group of animals compared to others, then as a breeder, as a responsible one, you have to make a decision that is not based on your personal pride, but just based, on the animal's interests. And my personal decision at that time was, okay, I don't want to sell my geckos for cheap, because my experience in my study, and Martina can back me up in here, we experienced this sadly over and over again. Maybe not for you, maybe not for me, maybe not for many of our listeners, but for many other people, an animal is worth what you pay for it. And it is really telling that often in reptile medicine, we only see high-end animals as our patients. We don't see all the normal stuff, but they are animals too. They get sick too. they deserve to be treated fairly. So as a breeder, I can't control how others treat their animals, but I can control who I sell my animals to. And of course, I will find the one or the other home for a low-end animal. But my strategy at Dragoon Gecko was from the very beginning based on the responsibility that I felt as a breeder to maximize, the amount of high-quality animals in my breeding stock through rigorous and selective line breeding. And how I did that is also something that would fill probably another podcast, but this strategy really worked. And over the years, I was able to push the amount of, top animals to a much higher level, which allowed me to breed fewer with a larger gene pool, allow my females to take breaks. I didn't let my breeder females breed every season. So this is also something that I discovered over the years. If you want to unhold the color quality of your breeding females, don't breed them every season. And people are like, wow, I've never heard of this. Yeah, but if you compare it to humans, if a 14-year-old girl gets pregnant every year, she will, after 10 years, look nothing alike a woman who has never born a child. That's totally normal. Reproduction causes stress in a body. It's bearable, it's nature, it's fine. But in nature, the main goal of an animal is to produce as many offspring as he or she possibly can, because a predator could come at any time around the corner and your life could end there. But this is not the life that awaits our animals in our terrariums or in our racks. So we decided to bring them into our lives, and we decided to care for them. And I don't say that every breeder, now has to, consider doing breaks. Not at all. There is, like Brian Barczyk always says it, there is more than one way to reach your goals, and it's totally fine if everybody follows his or her own way. But I just realized over and over again, especially with certain lines, that animals can hold their quality so much better if you allow them short breaks. Even if you just take a break after 2 seasons in a row, it really shows. And this shows me that the animals really profit from a short phase of, where they can really, get a rest and get their strength back. And this reflects in the coloration that they have. And some morphs, like the ghosts, they really speak to us also in the way they change colors. So maybe that's something that you realize too with your ghosts?
Yeah, definitely.
That they
It's so
change
cool.
colors?
Yeah, it's even to describe it to people who don't work with the ghost, it's so hard to describe the color change from when they hatch and they go through their different developments and stages. And it's so hard to describe, but it's such a beautiful color that they produce.
Amazing. It's
Yeah.
amazing. That's
Yeah.
one of the reasons my heart beats so strong for the ghost.
Yeah, it's like no
Yeah.
other morph that goes through those they almost sometimes don't even look like the same animal. Like you see pictures of an adult and then a hatchling and they're like, no way that's the same animal, but it's just the phases that the ghost goes through.
Yeah. They have so much potential. It's insane.
Before we go on, I want to say thank you to our sponsors. Impeccable Gecko is a small to mid-sized family-operated hobbyist breeder operation. They specialize in leopard geckos with high-quality genetics. Their goal is to provide customers with the absolute best animals that they could produce, coupled with honest and transparent business methods. At Impeccable Gecko, integrity and animal welfare are above all else. Impeccable Gecko is a strong supporter of the Strength and Leos podcast, so follow them on social media and check out what they have available. John of Gecko Boa started early, like most of us, catching lizards and snakes in his backyard at any chance he got. Over the years, he has kept and bred more than 80 species of reptiles. In recent years, his focus has turned to specializing within the genus Eublepharus. He has worked hard to pioneer some of the most cutting-edge leopard geckos while maintaining genetic purity and honesty. He also keeps the most diverse collection of pure Eublepharus species in the world. He has coordinated with biologists around the world and has contributed DNA sampling and distribution range info to help sort out the cladistic relationships within the genus. Check out geckoboa.com for more info and available geckos. Suburban Geckos is operated by Chris Charlton. Chris's passion and enjoyment for herpetoculture, and more specifically, leopard geckos, drove the desire to take his hobby to the next level. With experience in breeding and raising reptiles well over 20 years, Chris is dedicated to producing quality animals for both the hobbyist and breeder alike. Suburban Geckos treats each animal with the utmost care and respect, and cuts no corners when it comes to health and integrity of their geckos. What started off as just a couple aquariums has grown into quite the collection in just a few years, and they wouldn't have it any other way. The dedication to their animals is unparalleled and evident in the quality and health of their animals that they produce. Exemplary customer service is another area where they excel. They're readily available to answer any questions you may have regarding their animals, husbandry, and etc. For more info and to see their availability, check out suburbangeckos.com. Blizzy-billed Leos, while new to the scene, is taking strides in following the footsteps of top-tier breeders and keepers in care and ethics while aspiring to bring fresh looks and crosses to explore latent potential. Prior to becoming a breeder, Greg of Blizzy-billed Leos completed hours of extensive research on lines, ethics, morphs, and how certain traits interact with others in order to begin projects which are coming to fruition already in the second season of breeding. With a major focus on line breeding the correct way and customer service done right, Blizzy-billed Leos aspires to be a breath of fresh air to the customers and keepers they encounter. Be sure to check out their Instagram, Blizzy-billed Leos, and stay up to date on project development, availability, or just tips on having healthy animals in your care. Dab Exotics is a hobbyist breeding operation that was started in 2017. They specialize in producing healthy leopard geckos from top quality genetics. Dab Exotics is an awesome supporter of the Strength in Leos podcast, so follow them on social media and check out what they have available for sale. Shane Kelly is a blue-collar, working-class guy that has a reptile breeding business with his wife and kids. They are currently working with high-quality ball python morphs, western hognose snakes, and select leopard geckos with a focus on bold stripes, and they're looking forward to adding Albie Snow and Ghost this year. They have been listening to the podcast since the beginning and are proud to be a Season 4 sponsor. Go check out their social media, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube, and also check out their morph market to see what they have available. When you first began just working with ghosts and everything, were people really interested in ghosts? Was there a strong market for the ghosts, or was it you
No,
really having to prove people that
not at all.
ghost is such an awesome being?
When I got into the ghosts, nobody else was working with them and nobody took them serious. And even years later, people were always asking me, I got messages from around the world. Where did this come from? And is it a new mutation? Did it appeared in your stock? And I always had to explain to them, no, it's a really old color mutation, probably one of the oldest that we have. And the trick with a ghost is that they change color so much and they look different, and people don't compare them to other lines that have a similar thing going on. So what I find funny all the time is that in the first years, people were so afraid of getting into ghosts because they were like, oh, I can't tell if my animal is a normal ghost or if it's a normal or a ghost. I can't tell the ghost apart from a normal hypo. With time you can even see the most tricky stuff. And what I find really interesting is that after White and Yellow and Enigma appeared, we saw animals after some generations that still today we see animals that have all the markers and that we visually identify immediately as a White and Yellow or as an Enigma. And with White and Yellow, I stick to that because it's more interesting. So you have those White and Yellows where you immediately see they are White and Yellow. And then you have the White and Yellows where you don't see it at all. But people will still buy them and still breed with them and buy them for cheap because they trust the breeder and they trust that they will, in return, after a little bit of, experience, be able to tell the offspring apart. It's the same with the ghosts. Exactly the same. There are combos where you can see it immediately. Ghost and Snow tend to go very well. You see those immediately. But thankfully, the overall opinion changed after Artlink's geckos in 2007 produced the first Max No Ghost jungles. This was a really huge positive impact on the gecko community worldwide, because until now we had just seen Ray Hines and Alex Hughes stuff. Sorry.
Yeah.
It's late over here.
Right.
Yeah. But later on, after, the starting point, we saw those interesting Max No Ghost jungles from Artlink's geckos, Lottitz in Sweden. And I visited her in Sweden. And she was also the founder of the Black Pearls, by the way. Way back
Yeah.
then, there are still pictures from me as an ugly teenager holding the very first black gecko at that time on my shoulder.
Wow. That's so
Yeah,
cool.
this was an amazing female. She was so cool. And I was really happy that Lottitz recognized my breeding work and my Lyme breeding work, and she was willing and so generous to entrust me with the whole project. So this was one of the first projects from other breeders that I completely took in, and others later in the years should follow, for example, the neons and other stuff. But those were the very first ones, and that was the beginning of our Max No Ghost jungle line, which led to the Max No Ghost stripes, and then ultimately in the Ghost stripes and the Albase Ghost lavender and stripe stuff. So
Yeah. You've
and
done
over
so many
those
amazing
years,
things with it. Yeah.
and over those years, the more people saw, and the more people, had the courage to buy one of my animals or from other sources and just post some stuff, the more people realized, oh, there's really something going on with this morph. And today I still get so many inquiries for the lavender ghosts. It's insane. So from around the world, from India or from some Asian countries even, it's really cool to see that they have made such a huge come around, and they are one of the oldest morphs that we have here. They were just so underrated all the years.
Yeah, and I think people today even they're still scared sometimes when they see ghosts until they see the potential of it, and it's not. I feel like until they see the potential of ghosts, with like, wow, there's so many things that you could do with it, and I'm like, that's what I've been trying to tell people. There's so many cool possibilities and so many different directions to take it in. It's just people have to start working with it and seeing what it works with, and start experimenting with different lines and seeing what people have done with it and seeing how they could put their own spin on different things and different
Yeah, that
lines.
made me smile so much when I heard one of your podcasts while cleaning geckos, and suddenly the topic came to ghosts. I was like, oh, they're talking about ghosts. I was feeling
Yeah.
like a 16-year-old all of a sudden again, and I was hyped, and I was like, I can relate so much to what he's saying. Yeah, it's true. So thank you for bringing this topic up. It's so refreshing also to have, other breeders sharing their experiences and findings, because if you're the only one for a long time, you repeat the whole same things over and over again, and you're
Yeah.
starting to wonder whether people think you're crazy or
You start to think you're crazy.
yeah, definitely. So if I may ask you, what were your findings with ghosts so far? So what's your personal experience with them?
Yeah, I think I love the ghost, and especially when you add so many different colors into ghost and adding stripes into ghost. There's so many cool ways that the gecko changes over the time, and you could really do a lot of creative things with ghosts. And I think also in terms of just having a line that not many people have and not many people know about, and educating people about where it came from and how it's not a new genetic. It's something that has been in the hobby. People just overlook it, and really just bringing something that's overlooked into being more mainstream, I think is something I really strive for with the ghost genetics.
Awesome. Exactly. And I
Yeah.
mean, I'm seeing more and more people. I even saw, I made a break from social media for 5 years, so I'm not really up to date. And this year I walked over a small fair in Switzerland. And then I saw, a breeder with animals that looked a little bit like mine, but different. And I was like, that was so cool. I was asking the breeder, oh, this is interesting. So where did you get the ghost from? Yeah, it's Alex Hughes' line. I was like, Yeah, probably, but Alex Hugh isn't breeding anymore, so where do you got them from? Just asking. I'm curious. So, and then it was like, yeah, it's Dragoon Gecko's line. And I was like,
Oh
oh,
wow.
that's, and I was like, oh, bingo. Oh, that's interesting. So what do you think about Dragoon Gecko? And the answer was like, I don't know. I haven't heard much, but I really like the work. And unfortunately, she never answered my reply. And I was like, yeah, then she's answering now. Hello, nice to meet you. And on the other side, the jaw was dropping. It
Oh
was
my
like,
goodness.
oh my goodness, where did you come from?
Yeah. It's like an
And it
angel
was,
just came down and is coming to me and answering all my questions.
but honestly, this one moment for me was so special because this is where all the hard work is really worth the effort. If what
Yeah.
you do has inspired others enough to work with your line and put their own fingerprint on it, to be inspired what you created and take it a step further, this is the greatest honor that you can ever have as a breeder. And I'm really thankful for this experience and also for all my other clients over the past years who have continued to work with my lines and given it their own, little genetic twist. This is wonderful, truly amazing.
Exactly. Yeah, and there's still so much to be investigated with Ghost and putting it into different genes and making the Ghost kind of last longer into
Yeah,
like adulthood and really having some of those colors that we see. It's really easy to make a pretty gecko when it's, 10, 15 grams, but how could we make that when it's, 50 grams and still have that beautiful gecko? And I think Ghost really
exactly.
does sometimes really capture those colors that you don't really get with um, some younger geckos that really keep when it gets older, which is, I think, really amazing to see too.
Exactly. So you said something very interesting. So the privilege of working with a line that not many people work with gives you, a totally unique experience because you're free of the stress of, competing with others. You can just do
Yeah.
what you want and you can take your time. So that's what I did. And um, I never planned to be known for my work with the ghosts. Never. And it just happened that suddenly, after a few years, I was the ghost girl of the gecko
Yeah.
community. You want a ghost? You go to her. You ask her. I don't know. Ask her. She knows
Yeah.
that stuff. It's like a rare dog breed that nobody really cares about, and suddenly, people start coming and asking you, and yeah, you're getting the chance of actually convincing them that this is a really, really cool project, and working with the ghost is something that I deeply and enjoy still today. It's my one passion, probably. And acquiring them from such an early age and line breeding them for such a long time also gave me the huge joy and chance to do many first time combos. Not because I ever wanted to do first time combos. I don't care about this so much. For me, it's the quality that counts. Pretty gecko will always, find a good home.
Right.
And a healthy gecko will always find a good home. And if your ugly ones are still pretty enough to find a good home, then I'm happy. And then I'm, totally satisfied with my work. Then I've done my job right and I've done something responsible. So this is how I feel. But of course, it didn't hurt that we produced many first time combos over the past years with the ghosts. Yeah, for example, the Maxno Ghost Lavender Stripes, the Reverse Stripes, the Lavender Stripe Ghosts. Montano's Ghost Raptor was a big thing actually in the European community because at that time there was, as you know, in every country, in every time, there are certain politics involved. And at that time, there still is. And at that time, it was even stronger than today. It has changed, luckily. But at that time, there was the thinking that you should keep the wild subspecies pure and that you shouldn't
Mm.
breed them into color morphs. At the same time, people were complaining that the modern color morphs are getting weaker and weaker and smaller, and this is all irresponsible breeding, and we shouldn't be breeding color morph geckos. So that was the consensus in the forums in the time frame of approximately 2 to 3 years. And during that time, I took this advice. I took it, the critique as it was, a valuable advice, and I wanted to turn it into something positive. And I was like, okay, I have my raptor, I have my ghost raptors, so I want to breed Montanos into it. And then just to strengthen the line, I was prepared to do a huge step backwards actually in quality, just to, enlarge the gene pool and making sure the animals were as healthy and as robust as I could ever make them. Because at that time you saw also many small and not so good evolving raptors at the reptile shows. And that was something that I wanted to, work against genetically with what I had, with the material that I had, genetic material.
Right.
And then the Montanus Ghost Raptor hatched, my first one, and it blew me away because the eyes were like a lava lamp. It was nothing that I've seen before. I don't know if until today if this is a random mutation. I didn't bred for it. It's, for me, the goal was not to produce the next big thing. It has always been about my line breeding stuff and, inspiring others and the general quality. So of course, I didn't sell her for, this is the mystery gene, just prove it out. I still have her in my stock. She's pretty. She could be a marble eye. She could be anything. I don't know, but she was really, really cool. So I know that, yeah, I never had this mutation before and afterwards, and it also looks a little different from the marble eye. But anyway, that's not the point. The point is that I got something truly amazing out of a total outcross. And then, of course, I wanted to publish it and share my joy. And I was like, hey, here's this cool, healthy raptor hatchling having almost double size than a normal raptor that you see. And then a shitstorm exploded, and everybody was like,
Wow.
oh no, this, how can I translate German to English? This color morph shit goes way too far nowadays. And then I was like,
Wow.
wait a minute.
Yeah.
And then I brought all their arguments in one XXL post, and then I, answered all of that. And I was like, you claim that our animals are sick. That's why I introduced the new blood. And you claim that the bloodline, that the animal that I use from the pure subspecies blood is used otherwise. No, it's not. It was an animal that the breeder didn't want. It was an extra male that I, could use. I didn't use a female for this project, so I didn't take away anything from someone that wanted to breed pure Montanos and so on and so forth. So it was really,
Wow.
really cool. And after that, there was silence. And my good friend Carsten Grieshammer, he's the author of the leopard gecko book that is most popular in Germany. He was writing me, and he was like, "Touché, Rebecca."
Yeah. Yeah, you
So
just make all the haters be quiet.
yeah, I think it was popcorn time for him, because when people like him and I, we're approaching things from a more scientific standpoint, and we really try to do what's best for the animals. And everybody has the right to breed what he or she wants. If you breed subspecies, that's wonderful. That's perfect. If you breed color morphs, that's perfect as well. And if you want to mix them, you should be free to do so. There's no harm in doing so. So can we just all get along and be friends?
Yeah,
I don't
and
know.
love geckos and keep doing geckos the way you
Yeah,
want to.
and
Yeah.
yeah, and unite, and be aware of what unites us, the love for these amazing creatures. So I see in so many groups, and this has sadly become really a problem of the modern era when I look at it correctly, that we have so many haters on social media and so many splitting groups going against each other. That we really lose the focus of what's really important. It's really important to protect this hobby, to protect the animals, to care for them the best way we can, and most importantly, if we care for our geckos with all our hearts, to promote this beautiful hobby or the industry in a positive way to the outer world, and not giving them the impression that we are constantly divided and focused on finding mistakes in other people. That's not the way to learn. I have never seen any big historic figure really getting known in history that has ever done that. Go figure. So in the
Right.
time that you take talking bad about other people, you can use this time thinking about your mistakes and what you can do better in a positive way, not in a negative way. Love yourself, be kind to yourself, but do not allow your precious time to be used to look what others do wrong and what you do better, than others, to put yourself on a higher level than they are. Just look what you can do to, set a positive example to others. And that's what brings you forward, and that gives you great success. Personal experience.
Of course, yeah, and I think that's more of something that we need in the hobby. Just people to be kind to each other and really help each other out and really give each other information. I think that's the biggest thing. We all have this passion for leopard geckos. I'm talking to you from Germany, and what keeps us together is our passion for leopard geckos on opposite sides of the world, and it's awesome to see that you have this amazing passion, and we continue to learn from you. I'm learning more information about you, and then you could learn from me as well, and we're all in this together based off just the passion that we have for leopard geckos, and continue to just breed these beautiful animals, because that's why we got into it in the first place, is really the passion for it.
Yeah, and also, as you said, we always learn from each other. So there's really no reason to be intimidated by someone who has 20 or 30 years more experience. Maybe, you made the one discovery that helps this other person. I'm always happy to exchange, thoughts and plans and theories with other breeders, because the more and the longer I'm in this industry, the more I realize that we know nothing.
Yeah.
There's so many things. We thought we knew that how something works out, and then all of a sudden there can be a switch where we have to adjust. It's in genetics. It's always a constant path of evolving, and we all need the eyes and ears of our colleagues. And the more we exchange our thoughts and our findings, the better we are off, and the more we learn from each other, and the better we can adapt those findings to our own breeding strategies.
Of course, yeah, and that's where kind of having discussions like this are so important, because there's so many things that we could learn from each other, and then also just help each other as a community. If you learn something about supplementation that you think is, wow, like the geckos are coming out so much more healthier than what we have before, then that information has to be connected with other people so they could be doing the same thing as well, and really improve the life of the geckos, but then also the lives of the hobby in general. And it's always super important to continue to have in the hobby.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I wanted to ask you again, just in terms of the ghost as well. You've done so much work with ghosts in the past. What do you think is the future with ghosts, and what future plans do you have with the ghosts and things that you still want to see with ghosts in them?
Many. Too much that I can handle, honestly. For me personally, the ghosts, and I've written this in an article on Gecko Time years ago, for me, the ghosts are the true chameleons of the whole leopard gecko scene. They are so variable, they are so adaptive. You can put the ghost on almost everything, and you will get a complete different look. And you can select the looks that you like and shape it like you can shape no other, or rarely shape in other bloodlines. For example, the first ghost, interesting fun fact. I see some breeders over the world currently doing black knight and ghost crossings. The
Mhm.
very first ghosts that were sold to the market, 2000 till 2005, they were pretty dark, and people didn't want them. And
Really?
I bred years, and I put so much years and effort into making my ghost bright. and light and everything. And all of a sudden, a few really dark animals popped up in another side project. And I thought that was so interesting. And I decided to keep them. And now those dark ghosts are perfect for crossing out into any Black Knight or dark melanistic project. So you never know what you get with ghosts.
Yeah.
And my original ghost line split it into, I think currently I have 10 different genetic projects that I
Wow.
currently,
Just from
yeah,
that one line, original line.
just from that one line, it's 10
Wow.
different projects. Every project consists of different breeding groups. Okay. So we're talking about a lot of possible combinations, and it's important to me to have, yeah, a really rich and stable gene pool. So my future will be very busy, of course, also working with other projects, but the future for the ghost is very bright over here at Dragoon Gecko. We are currently working on improving the lavender ghosts further and further. They come along so nicely. This is one of the crazy stuff that I've ever seen. And for years and years, it looked like nothing would really happen because lavender is one of the most, maybe the most difficult color to breed in leopard geckos.
Yeah.
And it's crazy. If I wouldn't love this color so much, I would have given up already years ago,
Yeah.
years ago. And even with a ghost, it's one step forward, two backwards. But if you're doing it consistently, you will see progress. And after you hit the critical point, it just explodes. And what I hatched here in the last years is really, really interesting to say the least. I'm always a very secretive and careful person, not out of, just out of because I take this seriously. I don't want to do claims. I never, published a line after 2 generations and said, oh, look here, it's the Dragoon Gecko line. All the lines that I work with can be tracked back. And I think some of them deserve the term line because I bred them for such a long time, going back to 2005, 2007, 2012. Others are pretty new, so I call them projects. So I want to be really sure what I breed and giving, the new owners as much security as possible that I know, what I'm selling to them. So that's why I'm always a little bit careful and not, like to talk about things that I'm not totally sure about. But what I can say is we're having some really interesting projects over here. And yeah, looking forward to form them and see what they will do in the future. And
Yeah, that's great to hear. And I think one other thing that drew me to you in the beginning, just hearing your story and some of the lines you work with, is you work with so many lines that are really old and like lines that have almost been lost within, leopard geckos that aren't as popular and people almost forgot about them. And without you breeding them, people might not even realize that they exist. So another line that you also are into is the Albie Snow. And getting people into that's something you really attracted to, and it's not something we see too much in the States anymore because the line was almost lost, and if it wasn't for a few select breeders, then the line wouldn't be around anymore. So what has your experience been with that, and how did you get into the Albies?
yeah, that is the situation that I discovered over and over again, that at a certain point we come into a situation. Okay. It's a little bit complex, but I'm trying to explain it as simple as possible. I'm not sure if I'm able to, but I try my best. Please bear with me. So the whole leopard gecko market goes in circles, okay? It's just, that's what many people don't understand. They get into it when it's at a high peak, when everybody's crazy about leopard geckos, and after 2 years, they wonder why they can't sell their 100 normals anymore, as they did 2 years before. And then they panic and they get out of it, and everywhere you hear the gecko market is dead. I'm breeding leopard geckos for so many years, and I never ever had serious troubles, selling my animals to the clients. But I adapted to the market, and I saw the market as what it is. It's a market that goes in circles and in waves. It has its high and its low peaks, just like the ball python market, just like any other market. You have to understand this. And parallel to that, you with demand and supply, you also have times where you have a very rich and diverse gene pool. We had this, for example, 2005, 2007 was one of the high peaks when I got into leopard geckos. Unfortunately, I was not able back then to acquire some great bloodlines that were almost lost or that are lost today. For example, the A&M Tangerine line, which was amazing. I remember very well that I reserved a female and I wanted to pick her up in Hamm. And I didn't sell enough of my babies before that, and I didn't have the money, so I couldn't take her. So I gave her to Henrik and Lotta, and they promised me I could buy her again or one of her offspring, but somehow it never worked out. So as life goes, I still think of her, and I still regret not getting into those geckos because they were expensive at that time. And I was so sure and secure they would be around forever. So many great things like the high glows
Yeah.
gone. You
Just
don't find
amazing
them
color and
anymore.
contrast in those geckos,
So
and they're gone.
So what happened? What leads to an extinction of bloodlines? And this is a phenomenon that I have witnessed myself way back then in the past, and that I'm witnessing today again. So we are just hitting a new cycle. What happens is usually you have a broad variety of different morphs, and everybody is basically breeding a little bit of everything, mostly. So you have those gene pools of this little selected gene pools everywhere, but overall there are enough animals to hold the morph for the market, the industry. And then what happened back then is the raptor appeared, and the raptor blew everything away. It put everything to a new level, because you have to understand A&M geckos and Ron Tramper, Alberto, and all the others, they were at that time battling for the all orange gecko with the red eyes secretly. Nobody knew it, but they were on the hunt for that. And everybody had his own lines and projects and approaches to do that. And the smaller breeders, of course, they had their stuff. And then one of them succeeded. Obviously, Ron Tramper succeeded, and he named the mutation Raptor, and the one without eclipse Aptor. So we know that. And once the Raptor entered the industry, everybody wanted to have one. And people, well, they needed money to get those animals. So what they did is they stopped breeding their old projects. They gave up everything just to get into Raptor. So in the 3 to 5 years following the Raptor, we saw a drastic decline in lineages and projects being abandoned. And I myself am guilty of abandoning my own projects that I've founded. They might not be really important to the industry, but I'm not an advocate here. I just want to tell you I know very well what I'm talking about. I also had the need to make room for other projects and make decisions, and that is never an easy step to take. So I do not, want to criticize anyone for doing that. It's just a normal reaction of the market. And so we saw a lot of Raptor stuff, and slowly and steadily new lines, started to evolve. Some breeders were, realizing that there had to be something else beside Raptor. As beautiful as they are, and they are still one of my favorite classic morphs, so nothing bad about the Raptor. I love them. But at a certain time, you just saw them everywhere because everybody bred them, and they were 80% of the market. And what happened to all the others? So Raptor dominated everything, and it led to a huge decrease of other mutations. So it's not bad, it's not good, it's just as it is. And yeah, as I said, after some time, we saw some new lines coming up because the breeders, they realized and they adapted and they wanted to get into projects, and new mutations came. The electric, for example, which was beautiful and different and interesting. And today we see a similar thing. If you look around at the market, you see 5 lines or 6 lines present. They are beautiful. They're wonderful. But they take up most of the spaces in the breeding recs worldwide. So what happens to all the other stuff? And that's what made me so thoughtful. And that was a big turning point, actually, for me. I started Dragoon Gecko as a very young girl with a big heart and few knowledge. To be honest, as everybody in the scene, you have to start from somewhere. I don't blame myself. I just did what I thought was right. I wanted to breed the best quality geckos. I wanted to become, even worthy of even talking to the people that I admired so much at that time, that really impacted the industry. All those wonderful people like, Marsha from Golden Gate Geckos, Dan the Fireman, Ron Tremper, you name them. There were so many cool geckos around, and what I could afford looked nothing, of course, like the stuff that they produced at that time. So I always felt like I have to keep up. I have to get better. They don't take me seriously if I don't get better. So, and I did that, and my animals developed beautifully. And of course, I had the, benefit that I just fell in love with one or two morphs that weren't really popular and that I bred anyway, just of stubbornness because I loved them. But another focus, approximately half of what I bred at that time, were, focused on pushing the general quality forward and also going into the top modern stuff. And it was a wonderful time, and I enjoyed doing this very, very much. And then I came to a turning point around, I don't know, before 2020, I don't know, maybe 17, 18, when I realized that many of the breeders that I really admired, they quit the industry. The times were changing again. It was getting harder and harder selling the animals, and you were forced as a breeder to compete with many others on prices, etc. And I realized that I had fought so hard and I put so much effort into pushing and breeding the animals that I wanted and that I loved. And now with some projects, I was always almost the only one breeding them. And I realized if you put them away now, they will be gone forever because nobody cares about them currently. They are all looking for the next big thing. Enigma was a huge thing. White and yellow was a huge thing. Everybody was getting into them, and they are beautiful animals in their own right. No harm about that. You can never go wrong with a cool white and yellow. So, but that was just for me personally the turning point where I had to take a break from social media and to redefine myself and my focus. And I realized that my focus was not just breeding the next top gecko or having the coolest collection of animals, but to be the holy grail keeper, to hold what we have, because I saw that so many people that I admired so deeply they have put in their heart and soul. They've bred 10 or 20 years even before my time to get them to the level where they were at that time. And I just couldn't abandon them. And I saw the huge potential, and I was like, okay, we need to do a different approach, and I need to take a break from social media. You have to remember, at my early days, Gecko Forums was the main source and meeting point. It was a forum, for those who don't know, at that time.
Right, yeah.
For the
People would
younger
even know what that
generation.
is. Yeah.
Yeah, for the younger generations, for the younger ones. I'm an old lady. Sorry. I might not look like that, but I'm old school. So at that time, we didn't have iPhone, okay?
What?
We had internet, but it was very slow. And the only
Yeah.
thing that you could do was to go on a website called geckoforums.net, where you still find all my posts from the past. So if you want to spy and if you want to look what I did, the pictures are unfortunately deleted, but the posts are still there. You will see that I can prove everything that I said so far, and you can see some, of my projects there if you're interested. So I think it's always good giving credits, because I see so many misinformations nowadays in the public that I totally understand if people get confused and having a hard time, trusting people and getting confused how to verify. So Gecko Forums still today is there. You can look at that and you can have a sneak peek in the past. So what happened and what was the benefit of Gecko Forums is you had, imagine, all people, all the big players at one place. That was amazing. That was mind blowing. You
Yeah.
just had to go in there, type in a question, and the best of the best, they were answering your post. It was like, this is heaven. And we made such a huge backstep nowadays in this connection, in the ability to connect with each other. Of course, we have now Instagram and Facebook, and this is cool and I love it, and this is such a huge improvement in many other points. But when it comes to the immediate contact or an overview, who is breeding what, who's talking bullshit, who's talking the truth, what is, the mystery behind XYZ. Many people nowadays, they don't even know. I saw this blue head discussion. Many people are so, they hatch a gecko with a spot on the head, and they're so happy, and they're calling it purple head, and they think
All the
they are
different
starting
names.
they're starting something new, and it breaks my heart, and I don't want to spill, spit in the beans, or how do you say it? I don't want
Yeah.
to be the bad one telling them that there's unfortunately a line that is already having this name, and second of all, this mutation appears often in some tangerine lines. So that doesn't mean that you can't use them to do something interesting on your own. You can do so totally. And maybe you will hatch something amazing. I'm sure you do if you put in the time and efforts. But it's just fair if you know. And at that time, if I wanted to know something or if I want to prove something, am I really the first one making this combination? I had just to go on Gecko Forums and I had to ask, hey, has anyone bred Max No Ghost Stripe before? No? Okay, cool. Then this is the first one. And this was an excellent way for not being, arrogant or whatever, just being straightforward, honest, and careful and respectful, and asking the community, hey, have you seen this thing before? If you do, it's fine. But if not, please let me know, because I would just love to know for my records if this cross has been done before. So today, with all the splitter groups that we have on social media, we can't do this anymore. It's getting so complicated to get to knowledge. And I think that's what people also greatly miss, and that what makes the situation for upcoming breeders much more difficult. They can't inform themselves even on the top morphs that are, in high demand and value today. It's hard getting all the infos about them, let alone why should I even care about, informing myself about rare genetic lines that maybe could fit with those projects? So, and that was my approach. I was like, okay, Dragoon Gecko will transform completely here. I'll do a break of social media because I was really burned out from being on social media all the time again, and, seeing that the work that I had done so far was going in a direction that, I wasn't comfortable with anymore. So I took a break. I did a whole turnaround and I said, okay, Dragoon Gecko is not your hobbyist breeder for the coolest morphs. We still breed highest quality possible, but we are a holy grail keeper. We want to hold what others have entrusted to us, and we want to develop or continue with our own lines and develop them to a point where they are interesting for you, for your up-to-date projects to outcross your projects with. Because if there are just 5 bloodlines around and everybody makes the same crosses, what do you use for outcrossing at one
Yeah.
point or the other? So think about that. How will you develop something unique if you just get the genetic material from what everybody else breeds? It's
That's
difficult.
true. Yeah.
So I really hope that, yeah, in some small way we can inspire others to keep their old projects, or just keep an open mind and maybe follow those footsteps, and carefully think about also parallel to their actual breeding projects to look for fitting rare and old bloodlines to carefully use for their own projects to strengthen their lines and enlarge the gene pool. And of course, getting a chance of hatching something totally crazy, maybe.
Yeah, and I think even with something I tell people is like when you get into a different more like don't just get into it because everybody else is into it. Like if you were to never sell one of those babies you produce, would you still be breeding it? And I think that's what tells a lot of people what they're interested in. If they are not interested in breeding in it just because of the money, then you shouldn't get into it. But are you breeding it? And even if no one bought it from you and no one cared, would you still get it? That's what I tell people, and that's what people should breed. I think, in my
Yeah.
opinion.
And that's what's making this podcast so very, very important. And that was something that I, you know, really cherished also back then on the other podcasts. It is really important that we use this rare opportunity to tell people who are interested in leopard geckos, who maybe even breed their third or second season, that there is a way to get what you want. You can become successful and you can become known and very well respected in this industry. And you can come to a point where you don't have to worry, sell your animals. But this will not be by producing just with a focus on money, because it will blind you for the other steps that you have to take along the way to make it work. And you have to work with nature. You can't work against nature, or nature will work against you. So
Wow,
I
that's such a crazy thought. I never thought about that before. Yeah.
well, basically it all starts at the right selection of animals. Yeah, as I said, Dragoon gecko was, founded many years ago with veterinary medicine and science in mind, at the very least. And of course, my personal experiences with those fishes, I didn't tell that because it's a boring fact. It was very essential for me understanding quality management in leopard geckos. And one important step in quality management, no matter if you're breeding wild type leopard geckos or especially color morph geckos, is the right selection of animals. What is the right selection? Picking the reddest gecko, paired with the reddest gecko. That's what 90% of people do. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But it's like playing rugby. You're not playing chess. If you're playing chess, you do something different. You carefully select and compare your geckos to a standard, just like you do in the dog scene and in the horse breeding scene. So what I did, what Martina and I did, or what I did, was I developed my very own standard for leopard gecko, for a good sound anatomy that I still use until today. And I keep track on this anatomy features. I keep track on the fertility. I keep track on the growing rate. I keep track on so many things beside the color. And that results in, from 100 offspring a year, I will probably keep 2 to 5 for myself, because only they express the highest standard that I set for myself for breeding. I never, select like a breeder would. I select like nature would. And
Wow.
that has made all the difference.
Yeah, and it's so strong when you go into some of these projects. Even like for me, when I work with albies, it's something that I love working with. And even if no one else worked with them, I still love to line breed and get the widest of the widest snow of them and continue to breed them and also educate people what they are. Because even I still run into people today, and you think they've been around for over 20 years now, and you think people would know, but I'm still trying to explain to people what it is and how it works. And they're like, "Oh, did you just make that up?" And I'm like, "No, I didn't make this up at all. It's, been around forever, and I'm just bringing people to light, what is already out there and showing people my passion for them and then connecting to other people. And if they're interested, that's great. Like, that's awesome. I'd love to teach you about it, but if not, that's great too. You don't have to love what I love in different morphs."
Yeah, it's exactly. And for me personally, the always, that was a whole game changer. I was breeding Maxno ghost jungles for so many years, and then I saw the albase, and I knew immediately. I just had this gut feeling: you need to get those, and you need to cross them into your ghost line. So I acquired my first one in 2012. And since then, I have been working with them. And the problem was that my best ghosts at that time were max nose. So I needed to
Ah,
outcross first my max nose
right.
and waited for the perfect non-snow ghost female, which hatched then. Her name is Kalara. She's a lavender striped ghost and one of my favorites until today. And she was the founder mother of all the Albase ghosts in the future.
That
And
must have
she
taken a lot of patience to do that and a lot of selecting over
yeah.
time. Because that's a lot of
And
work. It sounds easy, but that's a lot of work to outcross and make sure you have the perfect female for that.
yeah, that's also one of the problems when you're really starting to push things to the limit. It's getting harder and harder finding the fitting animals. At the beginning, it's so easy. Every gecko that is slightly better than your stock will do the job. You know what I mean? You just have the whole variety and you can choose between so many breeders what you want to do. But as soon as you're really narrowing in and really have a clear concept of what you want to achieve, for every breeding project, you need different lines from different breeders. And breeder A may be perfect for the first project, but not for the second, and breeder B vice versa. So it doesn't make them better or worse of breeders. It just makes the whole selecting process much more complex and difficult the further you step into this line breeding game. But it's a step that is really rewarding and that I can really, really recommend. And in some cases, as with the albase, it means that basically you acquired your albae, but then you need to wait for the right basic animal that you have to breed because nobody else has it or breed it in that way that you need it. And then you wait for that one animal to hatch and to grow, and then you can start this project. So it's definitely nothing for impatient people.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that also speaks to your work because you've been so patient over so many years. And I think people have seen the results of all your hard work behind the scenes that, nobody sees the late nights and the early mornings of cleanings and a lot of the hard work and the money that goes into it as well. But people see all of your hard work
Oh yeah.
on display.
Oh yeah, a lot of money actually.
Yeah, and only so much space. We wish we could have more space, but you only have so much space to work with.
Yeah, but on the other hand, cutting down and focusing and narrowing on the projects that are really important to you can also be a good step sometimes. You know, you don't have to panically and hold everything just in case nobody else is breeding it. And I didn't want, I really want to make this fact clear. Every breeder has to decide for him or herself where he or she wants to go and what feels right for them. So sometimes the best way is to keep a line and to just sit it out. And like I did, I made a complete hiatus. I never stopped breeding, but I didn't sell any of my animals for the past 5 years, just due to the fact that I felt the market was oversaturated. I didn't want to had, you know, the dependency on selling my geckos that stressed me out a lot. And so I narrowed down and I basically just followed what I could handle. And yeah, just put my whole focus on conservation breeding. So all of the animals that I have today, they are 5 generations ahead of what I sold the last time. So even if people have bought my lines from the past, they will have made their turn and they will look that way and my animals will look my way. So this again contributes to the market instead of putting concurrence of each other. I think this is a real blessing for the market if sometimes you take your time and you take a step back and yeah, do not, put every bloodline on the market and just sit some things out and wait until the market is ready again. And I have gotten more and more messages lately about, the ghosts and other stuff and electrics, of course, that I now feel confident again to bring them on the market and make them available, of course, in a smaller scale. But this has put in so much weight from my shoulders because I know now that, I can find good homes for my geckos, and I'm not, dependent to sell them to anyone cheap who might not, cherish them as a living being and contribute to the bad image of the scene that some people want to get out into the world. That's also a main focus of everything that I do behind my work, to hopefully, I mean, I'm just a human, we all struggle, we are not perfect, and nobody's doing everything perfect, but I just hope that I can contribute of putting a positive image out um, to society, and that I can defend our hobby and all the beauty that it has, and contribute to this more positive and responsible image. So that's a good tip for managing hard and tough times. Just narrow down a little and focus on your needs and breed for your own purposes, and then sell in larger numbers again when the times are better.
Of course, yeah, and you have so much wisdom and experience on these kind of things because you've seen the market and for so many years now. And some people get really scared when they've only been in it for a few years, and that's when they begin to panic. But all of your wisdom over the past years has really contributed to what you've been able to do now in the hobby, and it's really awesome to see all of your wisdom being spit out on the podcast. And you obviously have to come on so many more times now and kind of recreate those old Gecko Nation radio days when you were on the
Aw.
podcast giving so much great wisdom for people to hear. And people really, really miss that. And really, you have so much to contribute with all the knowledge you
Thank
have
you.
and some of the lines you're working with.
Thank you so very much. I feel honored. It would be a great honor to be more often as a guest here. And I have to admit that I'm having a bad conscience, because although I made my notes, I see that we haven't covered so many points on my list. I deeply apologize, but I
No, that
also
just means you
feel,
have to come on again, just so many
yeah,
more times.
I also think it's maybe better to have, a fluent conversation than just sticking to notes and having this all robotic flow. That's not what I want. So I'm here for the connection with other reptile enthusiasts. So if there is any more questions that you like to have answered, you can go on my Instagram and DM me, and I will save them for a future podcast for sure. So please
Awesome.
bear
Yeah.
with me.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. And all the work that you're doing with this upcoming season, we'll continue to get updates on you. And yeah, just to answer so many more questions that people have to ask to you
And
over the
we haven't
time.
even touched the electrics and neon bells.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. So much more. Oh my goodness. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
And so many other of your lines that you've worked with too. It's like so much to capture. It's like I wish we had like a whole day to get like everything into just a bunch of episodes and
maybe
do
we need to
that.
do a morph special. So
Yeah. Oh my gosh, the morph specials and going to the morphs and all of your lines that you contributed to, and even you talking with other breeders too. You've had so
yeah,
many
that'd be
great
awesome.
breeders that you've talked to in the past. On various roundtables and things like that. And you've had so many connections with Ron Tremper being in his book and reading so many articles. Yeah, so you're definitely one of the legends in the hobby at this point.
Oh my gosh, do you think so?
Oh yeah,
Thank
you've
you.
made it already. Yeah, you're in the Hall of Fame.
Oh, thank you.
Definitely.
Wow.
Well, just to wrap the episode up, can I ask you a few? We do lightning round questions, and I want to ask you some lightning round questions.
Sure, go ahead.
Perfect. Nice. So, are you an early bird or are you a night owl?
Night owl.
Night owl. Nice. You're up late on the podcast. So awesome. Do you like to drink coffee or tea?
Both, but I'm more traditional tea drinker.
Okay, perfect. And do you like to read books or watch TV?
Read books.
Nice.
Because
Okay.
all the knowledge is sometimes in 2 or 3 lines. Especially
Wow.
when it comes to leopard geckos and the whole hobby. Read books, folks. Buy them, read them. You find so many things there that you can never, get on the internet.
Yeah. Are you a summer or a winter person?
Summer.
Nice. Okay. And into leopard geckos, do you like line bred traits or do you like non-line bred traits? I think I
Line
know your
bread for
answer.
sure.
Yeah.
For sure. I'm sorry.
I had a feeling before I even asked.
Yeah, I
And
think
when it
that's
comes,
an easy one, an easy guess
yeah,
to make.
definitely. When it comes to reptiles, other than leopard geckos, what is one reptile species that you'd love to keep?
Ball pythons. I
Interesting.
love them forever and ever and ever and ever. And I really hope that one day I'll be able to get a very special project. But the problem is that I have so many options to choose from that I can't decide. I
Right.
just
Yeah.
can't decide.
There's
It's
so many
like
morphs. Yeah.
I want to do this and then I want to do that. So I have to narrow down on one thing. And I already
And
have
then
my
next thing you know,
ideas.
you're gonna have all of them.
Maybe. So
And
yeah,
then,
as a good breeder, you're always a few generations ahead. So whenever I'm seeing a project, no matter whether
mhm.
it's snakes or geckos, I'm already in my mind painting a picture on what's possible in 4 or 5 generations, what I want to achieve. So, and that makes decisions really hard because I see so many potential in so many things. So,
Yeah, it's hard decisions. Yeah, we all have to make hard decisions. And then for the last question, if you were to only have one morph of anything, what would it be?
hmm.
It's a hard
Oh,
one.
that's a hard one. I would probably say the ghost.
Wow,
Yeah, they
that's a
are
statement, guys. You have to. Everyone has to get ghosts now.
definitely. If you haven't checked them out, I can encourage you to do so. Just look at Evan's stuff that he's producing and all the other great guys and girls that are doing amazing things with them. I think they have so much to offer, and it wouldn't surprise me, definitely, tip from an expert, if they would become the next white and yellow in the next 5 years in the industry.
Wow. Well, Rebecca, I appreciate you coming on to the podcast and spreading so much knowledge. And we'll have to get you onto the podcast again soon.
Oh, thank you so very much, Evan. Not only from myself, but also in the name of all the others. You contribute so much with this podcast for the hobby, and you allow people like myself to get in contact with others and giving, a chance to spread the love and the positivity and maybe inspire. So thank you from the bottom of my heart. It was a huge pleasure and privilege being here today.
Of course, yeah. And it was just a fun time and fun conversation.
Thank you so very much.
All right, bye.
Have a good night. Bye
You
bye.
too. And that is it for this episode of the podcast. Thanks so much, Rebecca from Dragoon Gecko, for coming onto the podcast, staying up late to record this podcast, even though she's on the total different side of the world. She's so dedicated and was so willing to come onto the podcast. So it's really just so awesome to get that history on there, right? I grew up listening to Gecko Nation Radio and being able to interview her and have her on the podcast as someone who has been in this hobby for so long and is still active and still breeding and contributing to things and being in the same era as some of the greats that we all looked up to that have paved the way for us as well. Super awesome conversation. Had tons of fun, really, just getting to know Rebecca and understand more about what she thinks about geckos and how she thinks about breeding and line breeding. It's been so amazing to think about that. So thanks again, Rebecca, for coming on to the podcast. As you guys know, at the end of each and every episode, I do my one big thing. And for this episode, I really was just so amazed at how in tune Rebecca was with her leopard geckos, right? It's really easy for us as keepers to really put what we want into the enclosures, right? We want the geckos to be in this size enclosure because it fits in this rack system, or we want to feed them this because this is easy. But really just understanding our geckos from really a naturalistic point of view is super important. And I think sometimes we don't think about that too often. Even giving our geckos, breeding breaks is one thing that Rebecca mentioned. And in terms of feeding and that kind of thing, it's really just super important to think about the care and putting that first above all else, which is super important in terms of leopard geckos, but is also great when we're caring for these things, right? These are living animals. And when it comes to breeding, obviously you can't have a good gecko that produces good babies without the health coming first. So that's just one thing I really picked up on that. Really, like she said, putting the veterinary science and the medicine in with the geckos as well. And that leads into so many other things that we talked about today, which comes first. And it's really cool that she always learns from nature. And she dropped that awesome line about learning from nature and not it being the other way around. And that's just so amazing and such a great thing to think about. So that's one thing I really hope you guys think about. Also,
I know only do one big thing. It's called the one big thing, but also you guys got to get ghosts. That's another thing. Go check out Rebecca's page and look more into ghosts. It's such an awesome gene, and I think everybody should really just look into it and see the amazing potential it has into it. So I sneaked 2 in there, but I hope you guys enjoyed this episode, and that's going to be my one and a half big things for this episode of the podcast. As always, I appreciate everybody listening to the podcast. Make sure to check out our podcasts. Obviously, you're listening to it. Send it to a friend, rate our podcast, subscribe on YouTube, and make sure to follow on all the podcast platforms. Make sure to check out our next episode on Spotify, Apple Music, Google Play, so many other options, YouTube as well. If you guys are listening and watching YouTube as well, make sure to check out our YouTube channel if you haven't already. This is your host, Evan Wooldridge. Continue to grow in knowledge and share the strength in Leos.